Welcome to lecture 12 of Mind and Reality. In this lecture, we're still focused on the overall question, what is the mark that distinguishes actions from things that merely happen to you? And as I keep saying, this is what Frankfurt calls the problem of action. So a good problem for us to be addressing. Now, where are we with that? We've already seen that one answer to this question is Davidson's view, or what's sometimes called the standard view. It is intention that distinguishes your actions from things that merely happen to you. It's because when you act that your events are somehow guided by what you intend, that these count as actions as opposed to other things which are mere happenings in your life. That idea seems fairly straightforward in cases where you think about, for example, falling over, where you do that either intentionally, in the manner of Buster Keaton, or unintentionally. One of those is an event, the other is an action. The difference seems to be that intention is guiding you when you're doing it intentionally. Now, what we're going to do later in today's lecture is to look at an alternative possibility, or another way of fixing the standard story, that's really due to the brilliant Elizabeth Anscombe, the idea that we can answer this question by appeal to justifying reasons. So the idea will be this, that the thing that distinguishes events which are actions from other events in your life is that where events are actions, there are justifying reasons for them, or more carefully, you have justifying reasons for them. So we'll come to that later. But before we get there, I want to carry on thinking about Frankfurt's argument from spiders. So if you remember, Frankfurt's argument from spiders was an objection to Davidson's view, the standard story, that we can explain what distinguishes actions by appeal to intentions or any other kind of mental states which cause actions. Frankfurt thought we could rule that idea out. So what I want to do today is to start by looking at an objection to Frankfurt's argument from spiders, and then, because I think that objection will succeed, a new objection, a different objection due to Bach, to Davidson's view, the standard story, that intention is the mark of actions. Pretty complicated, hey? So you've got that. What we're going to do is look at an objection to the objection that will undermine our confidence in the objection, and then a new objection, followed by a different way of refining this view. Lots being packed in there. Good value for money, I hope. Now, before we go on, it's very important that you have in mind Frankfurt's argument from spiders. So if we were in my lecture theatre, I would get you to spend 90 seconds with your lecture buddy going over that argument. I don't want to spend 90 seconds now doing that, because it may take you much longer, or you may already have the argument. So what we can do here is just pause and make sure that you have before you, and you understand, Frankfurt's argument from spiders, because what follows is all discussion of that. So don't go further until you've got that clear, otherwise I'll just be adding confusion onto confusion. All right, so let's take a look at this objection to Frankfurt's argument from spiders. So the objection concerns how confident we can be that spiders do not have intentions. Before I get into the objection, I want to acknowledge Sam, who at the time was a first-year undergraduate. You see, I was giving a different course when spiders came up, and I had in the lecture expressed some confidence in the view that Frankfurt holds that spiders do not have intentions. Sam came up to me afterwards and convinced me that I needed to check that. Now, this is, on the one hand, deeply embarrassing. I'm supposed to be the professor of philosophy, and I'm being refuted by a first-year student. And in fact, that's something which has happened several times. And in fact, it's really part of the joy of the job. So please keep the refutations coming. The other reason I mention Sam is that he was a very good illustration of something I think is terribly important. Never trust a philosopher. Never trust a philosopher, by which, of course, I also include myself. Philosophers are very frequently wrong about things. So what's the objection? Well, Frankfurt, in his argument, relies on the idea that there are things such as intentions which are inapplicable to spiders and their ilk. I think Frankfurt here is suggesting that concepts like the concept of intention doesn't apply. And Bühler, who has developed Frankfurt's views, writes that many animals that do not have conceptual intentions flexibly exercise agential control. Spiders very likely do not have them. So Bühler. And you can see, because I take it you did what I asked and you're really familiar with Frankfurt's argument from spiders, you can see straight away that what we're targeting here is premise 3. We're trying to show that premise 3 is potentially wrong here, that spiders do in fact have intentions. Why might we think that? Portia spider is a spider which hunts other spiders, and one spider that it hunts is a spitting spider, a spider that spits some poison. Quite dangerous spider to approach. Now what Jackson and Cross note is that Portia, when it's approaching a spitting spider, will typically do so by going on a long detour and coming at it from behind in order to reduce the risk of being spat at. Because of course if you're spat at by the poisonous spider and you're Portia, you die, which is not so good when you're hungry. So Portia goes around the back, takes quite a big detour, which is difficult and risky for Portia, but well worthwhile overall. However, here's the really interesting thing. When our spitting spider is a female who is carrying eggs, Portia does not, in this case, usually make the detour, but rather approaches from the front. Why is that? The spitting spiders are carrying the eggs in their mouths, and so of course they're reluctant to take the eggs out, but they would have to take the eggs out in order to spit at Portia. So the risk to Portia of being poisoned before getting her dinner is dramatically reduced in this case. So here we have an example where it appears that there is some element of planning in the actions of this hunting spider, Portia. However, the ecological observations by themselves, I think, are not decisive. What's really interesting about Jackson and Cross is that they combine these with a more carefully controlled lab-based experiment. Now, the design of their experiment is very simple. Portia is placed onto this pillar here. I think you can see the pillar in the middle here. And she sees that there is some prey on one of the ramps and nothing on the other ramp. But the apparatus is designed so that Portia has to then work out what is the path, what is the right path to get to the place where the prey is. And she can see that while she's up here, but she can't jump, although she is a jumping spider, she's got very impressive jumping ability. She can't jump directly to the lure. What she has to do is to climb down that central pole and go and find it. And here's the thing, once she's climbed down the central pole, she's no longer able to see where the lures are. And furthermore, the route to those lures can sometimes be quite counterintuitive. Sometimes Portia has to walk right past a pole going up, sort of apparently taking her in the right direction, in order to get to what's truly the correct direction. But nevertheless, report Jackson and Cross, Portia actually makes a success of this. She generally manages to pick the right path, even though information about which path is the right path is no longer available to her once she's down from the pole. That looks like planning abilities. It looks like when Portia is on top of the pole, she makes a plan about which route to follow and then sticks to that plan, even though information about the route is no longer available. And that does look, I think, a little bit, doesn't it? It looks a little bit like an intention. It looks like a little bit like an intention because it's a representation of some future actions directed to the goal of getting fed, of course, that guides action even though the thing represented, that information, is no longer available. It looks very, very compelling to me here. So it seems to me that we should not take for granted the assertions that spiders do not have intentions and such. We should indeed never trust a philosopher, including of course me, on this, Frankfurt and Bühler likewise. And it's very important here, I want to stress this, that this is not a matter of opinion. I'm not soliciting your opinions, and you can tell that because I haven't asked for your opinions. And although I'm not really very much into, I don't really sort of Facebook my tweets and that kind of thing. Did I say that right? I don't know if you Facebook tweets, but I do have the internet. So if I want opinions, I know where to go. This is not a matter of opinion. What we're trying to work out is, are we in one epistemic world or another? Are we in the epistemic world where we know that spiders lack intentions, or are we not? The research that we have just seen, I don't think demonstrates that spiders do have intentions, but I think it shows that we're not in a world where we could confidently say that spiders lack intentions. So it seems to me that this premise here is under fire. It seems to me that we do not know that this premise is true as things stand. So why have I put this in orange? I've put this in orange because we want to be cautious here. We want to go slowly. We haven't shown that the premise is false. What we've shown is that based on a short survey of currently existing evidence, we can't be sure that the premise is true. But of course it might be that a larger, wider survey of evidence could push us either direction, to actually rejecting the premise or accepting it. The other reason I put this in orange is because it's important for you, now that you're getting better at philosophy, I see this in your essays, it's important for you to slow down a bit. So it's not really enough to present an argument and an objection to that argument. What we've got to do is move quite slowly and see, well, what can we get out of that? What can we learn? What can we learn? What might be the possible responses to that objection? Well, I think there are three options at this point. So if you want to defend Frankfurt's argument from spiders to the objection that we do not know that spiders lack intentions, I think you've got three options. And actually what I'd like to do here is to pause and give you 90 seconds with your lecture buddy and just ask the question, which option do you think we should pursue? Right? What do you think here is the most promising option? Is it that we try a different line of argument altogether? Should we switch animals but try to keep the same structure as the objection from spiders? Or should we try to further explicate the notion of intention in order to save that premise 3? What do you think is the best way forwards? 90 seconds with your lecture buddy, go. So I wonder which option you might be pursuing. One possibility that you might have thought of is that you could say something more about the notion of intention. So you might try to say, well, look, it's true that spiders have some kind of action guiding representations. The evidence we've seen certainly seems to establish that, at least on the face of it, but they lack intentions in some stronger sense. Perhaps they lack plans where, there are trade-offs between multiple actions or something like that. Perhaps intentions are somehow bound up with life plans. This is a difficult line of argument to make work because spiders have proved to be much more intelligent than most people would have expected. That's one of the joys of research in the last sort of 50 or so years. We've learned so much about the intelligence of spiders, honeybees, and other insects in ways that were entirely unexpected. The other problem, of course, is that it's not enough to show that we don't have evidence that spiders have intentions. That might just be because we're not smart enough to work out the spiders. What you've got to show here really is that we have evidence that spiders lack intentions, and that I think is going to be quite tricky to establish. But there is another problem here, and to see that problem I want to go back to Bühler and Frankfurt, because Bühler and Frankfurt are really trying to separate intentions from agential control. But in doing that, they are creating a problem for the argument from spiders. I think we can see this as a kind of dilemma. On the one hand, here's the first horn, you might accept that spiders have intentions, but then you have to reject this premise. The other horn, you might say, look, spiders don't have intentions. They have some kind of representation which enables them to guide their actions, but is somehow more primitive than an intention. But if you say that, you're now going to face an objection, which is why we should accept premise 2. Why should we accept that the contrast between action and non-action is the same in the case of humans as in the case of spiders? If the actions are guided by different psychological structures, intention in the case of humans and something that isn't intention in the case of spiders, why should we think that The contrast between actions and mere happenings is the same. Different psychological structures, potentially different contrasts. So the problem here for Frankfurt's argument from spiders is really quite a deep problem. It's very hard to come up with a view that allows us to say that we know that both 2 and 3 are true. It's very hard to come up with a view that allows us to say that we know that both 2 and 3 are true. That's the challenge. So I think that the objection here is quite serious, and it's unlikely, although possible, that we can avoid the objection by further explicating the notion of intention. I won't rule this out, but I think that you're going to face very deep problems there. Now, we will also look at the possibility of switching animals, and in particular you might think that what we need here are not spiders but human infants, where premise 2 is going to be more plausible and we have a better shot of establishing the truth of premise 3 because we can contrast younger humans with older humans. That might be an easier thing to do. The problem, of course, for us is that there's relatively little evidence on intention, and so switching animals to humans isn't particularly easy. Maybe there are other animals that we could consider as well, though. So this, I think, is certainly an open possibility. The idea here is to retain the structure of the argument, but just change from spiders to something else, human infants perhaps. The other option is to construct an entirely different line of objection to the standard story, Davidson's view, according to which the mark that distinguishes actions is intention. And indeed, what we will do later is to look at such an argument from Kent Bach, also published in 1978, just like Frankfurt's, but taking quite a different line. So that's coming up, but before we get there, I just want to summarise what we've done so far. We're focusing on this broad question, that is just all of our discussion about action focuses on the question, what's the mark that distinguishes your actions from things that merely happen to you? I've introduced and considered Davidson's view, it is intention, and we also saw previously that Frankfurt objects to that view with his argument from spiders, as I call it. What we've just done is to raise an objection to Frankfurt's objection. The objection, I think, doesn't show that the argument from spiders is wrong, but it certainly shows that we need to do quite a lot more work if you can establish that we're in a position to know that both premises 2 and 3 are true. So it raises a big question mark, should we accept that argument from spiders? My own view at the moment is that it may be possible to make the argument work, but we haven't seen yet how it can work. We cannot accept that argument yet. So what we'll do next is to consider an alternative line of argument, a different line of objection to the view that it is intention that distinguishes actions from things that merely happen to us.